In our culture, it's common to hear a phrase, and especially if you hear it over and over again, you're like, oh, yeah, that must be okay. But there's a lot of phrases out there that our culture uses that we as Christians should really stop and think about. What does that actually mean? Typically, those phrases sound quite innocent in the very beginning, but then when you dig a little bit deeper and think about it, you're like, oh, that's not what it means at all. They just put these words together, and sometimes some of these phrases, I'm like, I am so confused. How do people even know what they're talking about? And I think that's very intentional. But this one today that we're going to talk about is not as hard to discern. And it is the question of, should it take a village to raise a homeschooler? Now, the phrase says a child, or it says it takes a village to raise a child. But I'm going to ask the question, and since you are a homeschooling mom, we are going to then put it within the realm of homeschooling because our lifestyle is typically quite different than families whose kids go to private or public school. We have our kids at home and we are just going about life. We have a family culture, all those things. So today I'm going to ask you, should it take a village to raise a homeschooler? And I'm going to be curious at the end of this to find out where you land. Do you and I land in the same place? Do you have some different insight? And I'm going to tell you at the end of the episode where you can let me know what your thoughts are. So let's get to it now. Welcome to Little by Little Homeschool Podcast, where we talk anything and everything homeschool and all that encompasses the homeschool lifestyle. I'm your host, Leigh Nguyen. I'm a mom who never intended to homeschool, and suddenly I am here, 14 years later, with 2 homeschool graduates and 1 more to go. No matter where you are in your homeschool journey, Little by Little Homeschool seeks to empower and encourage you to carry out this amazing calling of home educating and discipling your children. It's not always easy, but I'm here to walk alongside you because I promise that these years are worth all of your effort. Grab that load of laundry that needs folded, settle in at the kitchen sink to wash those dishes, or tie up those walking sneakers, and let's get into today's topic. The very first time that I heard this phrase of it takes a village to raise a child. Now, this is not meant to get political at all, and this might kind of show my age a bit, but it was Hillary Clinton who said that. And apparently she wrote a book in the 90s, I think 96 or so. Now, I was still in college. I was not reading parenting books at that time and really had no concept or didn't really care, honestly, about politics or anything. So I know that I didn't hear it in the late 90s. I might have heard it when she ran for president. I don't know. Somewhere in there, I remember hearing her say, it takes a village to raise a child. And it probably made an impact upon me because I probably had children at that point. So it would have been like post 2002, because prior to that, I would have been like, whatever. And I didn't know necessarily what she meant at that point fully. I just kind of assumed what she meant. And again, it doesn't matter politics. When we really get down into it, I just knew that the hair just kind of stood up the back of my neck. And again, whatever your thoughts are about certain politicians, I was like, yeah, I don't really want politicians having a say as to how I raise my child. And you're not really the village that I'm looking for. And I think that right there is key. There's a comeback that says something like, I've seen the village and I don't want it raising my children. So that might kind of give you a little bit of insight as to where I stand on this question. But let's kind of get into the weeds here because I don't think it is a yes or no answer. And the reason I want to talk about this today is because I want it to be just one phrase that you hear and you to already have thought through it and have a position on it. That doesn't mean that our position can't change, because mine slightly has over the years. But I think it's really important for us as believers to stand upon the word of God and know where our faith falls in with these different phrases. And so this is just one of them. If there are other phrases and things that you have heard, you want me to kind of try to dissect and get into, maybe I would do that. You'd have to let me know. But I think that we can very easily with this question say, no, absolutely not. We are just going to be an island, my husband and I and our kids. And then there's others who are like, sure, anybody who wants to have any say into our family and our children and our raising is welcome to. And that includes the government. But I kind of think that most of us don't fall on any end of those spectrums. And you have chosen to homeschool. Therefore, you don't just blindly say, yes, I'll let the village raise my kids, because you've decided, essentially, I don't want strangers employed by the government, your state government, to spend more time with my kids than I probably do in their waking hours. And I don't want them to have all of those years from 5 to 18 for 9 months out of the year and 6, 7, 8 hours a day. So you've already said, I'm rejecting part of this village. So right there, I think we all, no matter where we fall on this question, we have that commonality that we have said, no, I'm going to educate my kids, and our family culture is important, and how we want to raise them and the worldview we want to give them and the experiences we want to give them. We're not going to just allow somebody else to dictate that. And so when we hear a politician say, it takes a village to raise a child, it's okay to say, I don't know you personally. I only know a little bit about you. And yes, we shouldn't judge people, but just like, I don't know you. You're basically a stranger. Even if everything that the internet has ever said about a politician is completely wrong and false, I don't know you. So I'm not going to hand my child over to you. And that's okay to say, I don't know you. I don't want you to be a part of my child's village. And then there's, so we could say, okay, no, we're rejecting this certain part. We're not going to send our kids to school. We're not going to blindly put them into activities and things. And that doesn't mean that it's wrong to put them into secular activities such as soccer or chess club or anything like that. But we need to be aware, right, of who the influences are. That might include sticking around. There were many activities and things that my husband and I volunteered for. We didn't want to. We didn't want to spend our time like that. It would have been easier just to drop them off. But we said, you know what? We've rejected the village of the 6, 7, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 180 days a year. So why would we just blindly send them somewhere for 2 hours, a couple nights a week? We don't know that village. Essentially, they are strangers to us and to our children as well. But then there's the other aspect. Recently, we had a child dedication at church, and as they spoke and, charged the parents with raising their children, then part of it is the congregation saying, yes, we will come alongside you. And that's beautiful. Now, I don't personally know all of those parents. I will gladly come alongside them if they ask us to, if we form a relationship with them. But I think in a broader sense, we can be a village as far as on Sunday mornings, as these children grow up and they see us and we can interact with them and say good morning, and as they're babies and we could, smile and make them giggle. And as they get older, we can talk and we can interact with them in their life. And if we know the parents, we're like, oh, I heard you just started riding a bike. That's great. And so we can have a certain part of being that village. And I think really what we need to ask ourselves of this question is, what does this mean for homeschooling Christian parents? What does the village mean? What does that look like? Does it really take a village? So going back to that, if I say no, then that's excluding everybody. That's excluding the amazing parents and amazing in-laws and the aunts and uncles and neighbors and people from church. And so there are some really great people that can speak into our children's lives, that can also speak into our life when we are just overwhelmed with everything and at the breaking point of just the day in, the day out, and just our emotions are running high. We have, as homeschool moms, hopefully have at least one friend that we can talk to and one person that we can kind of maybe commiserate for a little bit and then, put our big girl pants on and get back into the trenches, and somebody who's praying for us and knows things. And it doesn't have to be a large group, but we get to have a village if we want. Now, then on the flip side, if I say, yes, it takes a village to raise a child, we think back to village. So think back to times when people did live in villages, or even think about some countries where there aren't necessarily towns, there's just villages. So think of even your town as your village. It's probably quite large. So let's maybe kind of bring that down a bit, because you might live near a city and there's thousands of people. Let's bring that down to maybe just your neighborhood or just your block or just like a certain square footage or square miles around your house. And you probably don't know a lot of people. I look out into my neighborhood and I don't know a lot of people. I do a lot of walking through my neighborhood and I don't know 99.97% of the people that live in my neighborhood. And so, therefore, I'm not going to just throw my kids to them. Now, granted, my kids are older, but when my kids were younger, just because we lived in this on the same road as other people, just because we could afford a house on the same road as other people, didn't mean that they were on the same page as us, didn't mean their worldview was the same. Did that mean that I shunned everybody and my kids didn't play with anybody else? No. There were other kids that they played with. Typically, it would be on my terms. And I didn't necessarily allow those parents to necessarily speak into my kids' life because I'd be like, why don't they come over here and play in our backyard? And I had the opportunity then to speak into their children's lives. And so I don't think that there is a straight answer. If you're looking for a straight answer, sorry. There is no straight answer of no, it does not take a village. And yes, it does take a village because we have to think about this. So how about this question? You get to choose if you have a village and who is in the village, and you also get to pivot as needed. So let's go back to that. You get to choose if. You get to choose if there is a village. Now, you might be at a time where maybe you possibly have recently moved somewhere new. We did that 2 times, mostly the first time when we moved to a different state and didn't know a single person where we lived. And therefore, we had no village that was local to us. As we started to get to know people and picked a church, and then we were attending a lot of kids' activities at a different church. And so we slowly began to be intentional in getting to know people and building a village and watching their character over time and allowing them to have access to our kids and to speak into our kids' lives and to encourage myself and my husband. And so we get to choose if there is a village. So there might be some times where you're just like, it's better right now for us just to have a very small world. We've got a lot going on. And this is maybe just a temporary thing. I don't think that it is good for you to say, no, we're not ever going to have a village, and your children get out at 18 and have never had any other type of people speaking into their life, which, let me take a side note. Each of our children, as they had gotten to probably like late elementary school, middle school at the latest, we became very intentional about finding mentors of the same sex as them. So for my daughter, an older woman, my son's an older man. And it wasn't like they were spending a ton of time with them. So let me give you an example of my daughter. One of my most dearest friends was the children's minister or children's director, whatever they called it, at our church. And so she would spend many hours pouring her heart into the children's ministry. And on Wednesday evenings, we had a church-wide dinner, and then there was a kids club. And so I knew that it was important for another woman, so my daughter's the oldest, to speak into her. And I knew this friend, she was and is solid. I would still allow her now to speak into my daughter's life if we lived nearby. But I knew that she would be a really good influence and be good for her to spend time with her. And it was a trusted person. I knew that this was good. And so on Wednesdays, my daughter would do homeschool with us in the morning. We'd have lunch. And then after lunch, I would drive her over to church and I would drop her off. And she would spend the afternoon helping my friend. It was a win-win. And this wasn't like a, hey, can you be a mentor to her? No, it's like, hey, what if I dropped her off? So she would have been, I guess, maybe like 10, 11, 12. She's a homeschooler, so she's super responsible, right? And can I drop her off and she can help you out? And so it was a win-win because my daughter got to go and do something that the boys weren't doing, and she got to just spend a little bit of time doing something she thought was fun. She'd be organizing things, getting crafts ready, setting up and everything. My friend, it was a win-win for her because she had somebody who was full of energy to do all kinds of things, and she would have tasks for her to lined up to do, and my daughter loved doing it, and they had the opportunity then, the win-win for me then, so I will say it was a win-win-win, was that they would work together on things and be able to have conversations, and my daughter was able to see, okay, I really like, her name is Jen. I really like Miss Jen. And she's got some really great insight. And she's saying the same thing that my parents are saying. And so that's a side note. And so if you can find just even one person to speak into, especially as they get to late elementary, middle school, and up through high school into their life, that's just amazing. And it doesn't have to be the same person all the way through. It could be, so we ended up moving and then I would find somebody else to speak into her life once they got to know them. But let's go back to this. You get to choose if there's a village. You get to then choose who is in that village. And so that was an example. Miss Jen, she was most definitely in our village, and she's still in my village. And we get to decide who that is. We would hope that those within our family, those who are of the, we share the same blood, we have the same DNA, or that our in-laws, we share the same last name. We would hope that those would be good people to have in our village. But unfortunately, sometimes they're not. And so if you are encountering that situation, it is okay to say, you know what? My in-laws are toxic. My husband agrees. And so it's not good for them to speak into our children's lives. And that can be very difficult. You're going to have to walk through that. And there might be people that you allow to speak into your life for a season. Now, my husband and I first got married. We were not necessarily walking with the Lord. We had friends that were outside of that and who never desired to and still don't. And so when we first got married, had kids as babies, those people would still be around. And as our kids got older, we started to see if they're soaking things in and they're going to pick up on things that those people are saying. We just had to slowly let those people go from our life because they were not interested in coming to the Lord and growing in sanctification. And so therefore we needed to protect our children. And so sometimes we have to move away, maybe not physically, but we have to move on from some relationships. And so we get to decide who is in the village. So that's the pivoting. And so decide who is in your village. And if you're like, I'm not really quite sure, start with family. Start with in your church. Are you part of a Bible study? If you're not, get involved in a Bible study, maybe a Bible study that is specific to parents who are raising children, obviously parents who raise children, that's what they're doing, but maybe a homeschool group, somewhere that you can get to know others, that you can begin to trust them, see their character and see the fruit of God in their life, and then allow them to be a part of your village. And it can be fun. Having a village can just be downright fun. We've had some amazing villages at different times in our lives, and our kids just have so many great memories. Those parents didn't always parent exactly like we did. They weren't all homeschooling families. Most of them were not. And it led to conversations with our kids like, well, how come so-and-so gets to go ahead and do that? Like, well, we just have some different convictions about those types of things. And your kids will, some of them might push back a little bit. And eventually as they get older, trust me, they'll start to see that and they'll say, oh, okay, now I see why you made that different choice. But I think that let's bring it back down to just the small, tiny little village, which is you and your husband. It's great to have a village. Should it take a village? To a degree. I think that though the foundation has to be you and your husband. You seeking the Lord in your life, him seeking the Lord in his life, you both seeking the Lord in your marriage and in your family. And when you have that foundation and you're being intentional about your parenting, you are the primary village for your children, your family culture. You are it. And then you get to build off of that. You have to have that foundation, because if you're just outsourcing your parenting to everybody else, it's very confusing for children. And so you need to have that foundation. If I outsource just to that village I'm thinking of when my kids were younger, they would have gotten mixed messages because some parents said yes for something and other parents said no about the same exact topic. And so they'd be getting mixed signals. No, it's like, no, this is how we think about it. Yes, those parents maybe let their kids watch, say it's TV shows or certain TV shows. We don't feel that those glorify God and it's good for your mind to be putting that in. But this other family that's in our Bible study group and in our group of kids and stuff and families that hung out, they do. And we're not going to judge them. That's just what they do. And then we have other friends that are alike to us and don't. So you have to have that foundation with you and your husband. You got to do that work. So you have that, and then you can pull in the grandparents that are good and speaking life into them, and the aunts and the uncles and the friends and the pastors and the community at your church and neighbors. Pull them in for things. And you can easily do that, and you can do that joyfully, and helping your kids to see and learn great relationships with other people, but you have to have that foundation. So should it take a village to raise a homeschooler? I don't know if it should. It can, and it actually adds to the beauty and the fun of life, right? We should be having some fun as well, and enjoying and just having that joy and that peace of Christ. And so it is your choice, again, if and who is in the village, and pivot as needed, but you have to have that foundation of you and your husband. If you don't have that, then push aside the village for a little while here and focus in on that and your family, the group of you, whether your family, you have one child, you have 10 children, somewhere in between, or something more than that. I'm curious as to how you would answer this question. If you'd ever like to email me, I would love to hear from you. I read every single email and I reply to every single email. I used to have the email address in the show notes, but I would get so much spam that I stopped putting it in there. So the email address, you can always send me, or you can reply to one of my 2-Tip Tuesday newsletters. You can always hit reply to that and it'll come to me. But the email address is hello, HELLO, at littlebylittlehomeschool.com. And I would be curious to hear where you land on this. So I hope this kind of give you a little bit of insight so that you have that understanding and you've thought through that. So when this question comes up out in the real world, you'll already kind of know where you stand. Have a great day. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If it was just what you needed to hear, would you do me a favor and share it with a friend? And if you would like to connect more, social media links and more are in the show notes just for you. I promise to see you back here real soon.